Good morning, everyone. Good morning. My name is Haley, for those of you who don't know me, and this is Zach, and it's really our pleasure to be here with you this morning. It's just reflecting that we're all here for some reason, and what a blessing it is to be here together, to just take this time to come into this temple of God and to try to feel His presence in ourselves. So thank you all for coming together to do this. So our topic today is why devotees fall. And I feel like there's a couple ways to look at this question, and the way it's phrased as our topic, it's not really a question of if devotees fall, it's why devotees fall. And so how does that happen? What is the purpose of it? And what are we supposed to do about it? So I just wanted to reread the Gita reading because it's kind of points out the how it happens. And it's something I think we can introspect on and just recognize that pattern that can happen in ourselves. If one ponders on sense objects, there springs up attraction to them. From attraction grows desire. Desire, impatient for fulfillment, flames to anger. From anger there arises infatuation, the delusion that one object alone is worth clinging to the exclusion of all others. From infatuation ensues forgetfulness of the higher self. From forgetfulness of the self follows degeneration of the discriminative faculty. And when discrimination is lost, there follows the annihilation of one's spiritual life. So it's a little bit of a slippery slope. And it is nice, like Yogananda said, to catch ourselves early as soon as this is coming up. So just for us to start to recognize that in ourselves, but also to recognize that, there is a purpose to this. And, when we look at the story of Judas, it's very easy, I think, to see Judas in the context of history as this villain and to not really see him maybe as a part of our own selves, and to see his self representing the ego that can get drawn back down into these material desires, and his betrayal of Jesus is the ego's betrayal of the Christ consciousness. And that's something we are all still experiencing in ourselves. And so I think it's helpful to look at that as a part of ourselves, and then to start to look at, okay, what can we do now? The spiritual path is not something that's linear. We don't just start progressing and have this, smooth climb upwards. There are pitfalls and things that come up and happen, and it's all by God's design that this happens, that we progress a little bit and that we fall. And when I was reflecting on it, I thought in many ways it's to humble us, because if we just had this upward climb, it just wouldn't, we would have pride kick in, all of these things, and we would actually be on this false upward climb. We need these things to come to us and to happen so that we do get humbled. And just like our first chant, Lord, when in darkness, I will follow thee. And it's really in those times when we're struggling and when things have happened and when we've fallen that we reach out even more sincerely towards God. Yogananda said that the season of failure is the greatest time for sowing seeds of success. And isn't that true? It's, when these difficulties arise, when we've really, in some ways, even not done what we should do, that we kind of get a response that lets us know that something is a little bit off, and then and sometimes we have nowhere else to turn, and we have to turn to God. A couple weeks ago, we live on the Ananda farm on Kameno Island, and some of us here do as well. And we went on a little field trip a couple weeks ago, and we visited 4 other farms. It was kind of our last little window before all our markets started, and we wanted to go and visit some other farms and just expand our perspective a little bit. And we started out on the island at our friend Rachel's and got a tour of her farm, and then we were just having a little time with her, and she said, well, do you guys have any questions? And so various people were asking her different questions, and somebody essentially asked her, well, what have you learned in these last 6 or 7 years that you've been farming, and what do you kind of wish you had known in the beginning? And she said, you know, I wish I had known, and what I've learned is that everything doesn't have to be perfect. In the beginning, I put so much pressure on myself that everything had to be perfect. And then it clearly was not perfect. And she said, and I cried every day that first year. Every single day I was crying because it was not turning out the way I thought it was. But she said, but you know what I did? I cried in the field, and I kept working, and I kept going. And it was just a really beautiful example of, you know, we're struggling, things aren't working out the way we want to, but what do? We might cry a little bit, and that's okay, but we have to keep putting one foot in front of the other, and we have to keep going. You know, Yogananda also talks about, I've been reading this book, it's kind of been on my nightstand for the past month or so. It's part of the Wisdom series. This one is How to Awaken Your True Potential. And in the very beginning of this book, there's like this awesome spiritual pep talk. So I recommend it to everybody. But I came across this a couple weeks ago, and it just kind of came to me for this topic. It's a parable in the Bible, in Matthew, and I'm going to read this to you and then talk a little bit about Yogananda's interpretation and read parts of it as well. So it's the parable of the wheat and the tares are the weeds. Another parable put he forth unto them, saying, the kingdom of heaven is likened unto a man which sowed good seed in his field. But while men slept, his enemy came and sowed tares among the wheat, and went his way. But when the blade was sprung up and brought forth fruit, then appeared the tares also. So the servants of the householder came and said unto him, Sir, didst not thou sow good seed in thy field? From whence then hath it tares? He said unto them, An enemy hath done this. The servant said unto him, Wilt thou then that we go and gather them up? But he said, Nay, lest while ye gather up the tares, ye root up also the wheat with them. Let both grow together until the harvest. And in the time of harvest, I will say to the reapers, Gather ye together first the tares, and bind them into bundles to burn them, but gather the wheat into my barn. So Yogananda's interpretation of this parable, he says the householder, the farmer, is the devotee, and he is sowing in the field of his consciousness the seeds of self-realization. And while he's asleep, while he's not spiritually aware, the subconscious tendencies of past bad habits come in and sow their seeds also. And so as things are coming up, both of them were having these good spiritual qualities that we're cultivating, but we still have these subconscious tendencies springing up along with our spiritual progress. And so his servants are our self-control and spiritual discipline. And they ask, well, do you want us to go and get rid of all these things? And he says, no, if you do that and focus all your energy on trying to uproot all of these tendencies, you're going to just actually give them energy, and then you may not have enough energy to give to the spiritual qualities that we're trying to cultivate, that wheat of self-realization. You know, and I was reminded of, I think it was last year, we had somebody visit the farm, and the farm is, you know, just abundant with life, and we try not too much to discriminate between the crops and the weeds, because they're all together. And if, exactly like he's saying, if you focus too much on the weeds, then you don't have time left to cultivate the crops. And we had this woman visit the farm, and she walked around, and at the end of her tour she said, you know, I was always so intimidated to have a garden because I thought it had to be perfect, but now I can do this. And you know, we see that, you know, if we really tried to get rid of all the weeds on the farm, that would take up our entire day, all of our energy. And you know, we have to keep sowing the good seeds and, you know, let them coexist. And then, you know, as we're cultivating these good habits and these good seeds, they grow up and they start to shade out the other things. And I just wanted to read directly from Yogananda's words what he goes on to say. Do not waste your time concentrating on negative, unspiritual habits, for in doing so, you might lose some spiritual habits because of not being able to focus on their growth. Go on cultivating the good spiritual habits, and don't worry about the unspiritual habits until the harvest of divine ecstasy and joy contact with God arrives. In the time of divine ecstasy, the expert reapers of spiritual perception and spiritual habits can gather the weeds of all past incarnations from the subconscious mind and burn them up with the power of wisdom and light accumulated in the brain through the interiorized mind. In meditation and sleep, the mind and energy retire into the spine and brain and obliterate habits of worries and disquietude. In sleep, the energy dispels worries only temporarily. In deep meditation, the superconscious uses the relaxed energy of the mind, concentrated in the brain, to go deep into the brain grooves where habits are secreted and cauterize evil habits. You know, I really love what it says in the end there, what it's kind of all leading up to, which is for us to, you know, really make the focus of our lives, you know, in that spiritual effort where we're reaching out to God, where we're focusing on that, where, you know, we have all of these other things in our lives, but, you know, and to some extent we do have to recognize them and keep them at bay, but we have to give as much energy as we can into cultivating our relationship with God and our oneness with God. You know, in truth, we already are all one with God, but we have this veil of separation that has made us lose touch with that. And so it's always there. So if that is our focus, that is where we're going to go. You know, it says that in meditation, the relaxed energy in the brain, that the superconscious is able to come in and to essentially regroove the brain and cauterize our evil habits. And one thing I love about this is it's, you know, something that happens by the grace of God, by the superconscious. It's not something that we have to figure out. So oftentimes we want to know everything and we want to control everything, and we just simply can't do that. It's, you know, it happens automatically if we put out that effort and that sincere calling of our own hearts. You know, I had this experience of first coming to these teachings and first coming to Ananda, and that experience where you kind of are at a low point and you start reaching out and looking beyond your current circumstances. And for me, I had recently graduated college in San Francisco, and after college I had gotten a job, and then I got fired from my job. And I had been reading, my mom had gifted me Autobiography of a Yogi, and I had already started reading that book. And, I could feel something special about it, but I didn't think too much about it. But I was reading it at the time, which I've reflected on later, thinking, well, maybe there was something to that. There was like, the door was starting to open a little bit. So I got fired from my job, and in a total act of desperation, I called my mom, which is, oftentimes when people find out that my mom and I have this mother-daughter relationship, they're surprised because we're very different, and it's not usually something I do, to call and reach out to my mom. But in this case, I had nothing else to do, so I called my mom, and she asked me, would you like to go to Ananda? And I had known she had gone to Ananda village, and I said, well, I don't really know what that place is, but sure, I'll go. And I went to a little retreat, about 5 days retreat, which was just designed for people who were brand new, first-timers retreat. And while I was at Ananda, I picked up this book by Swami Kriyananda called Out of the Labyrinth. I was actually drawn to the title on the bookshelf. It was called Crisis in Modern Thought. And I had just graduated with a degree in philosophy. And this book was like perfect for me, because it was Swami looking at all of these philosophers I had studied in my education and offering what to me was very meaningful commentary that I had not really come across before. And, as I was reading this book, and the book is, just like you would imagine a book on philosophy to be. It's very intellectual, and it kind of goes through these things point by point. And for me, at the time, that's exactly where I was, and that's exactly what spoke to me and got through to me. I think for many people, if you're really centered in your heart and you, know that you are seeking God, that book may not speak to you. But at the time, for me, it really did. And what it helped me to do was really to let go. I had felt studying philosophy, essentially like all this pressure to know things and to be able to reason things and to figure things out and to, have intelligent responses to what's going on and to just, whatever. I can't even relate to it anymore. But what his book helped me to do was just to let go of all of that and to know that I don't have to figure everything out. There is a bigger plan, and my role is much more simple than I thought it was. My job is to reach out to God and to ask to know Him, to invite Him into my life, to think of Him in every moment I possibly can, and to meditate, to offer my energy, to focus my energy inside and offer it up, which takes an amazing amount of willpower and energy to do that regularly. We start to develop the habit, and then we have this power of habit that can come in and help us. But to rise up to do that, it takes a lot of effort on our parts. But that's what our job is to do. And when we do that, it's like the rest is up to God. The grace of God comes in and actually changes us. But if we don't have those experiences where we kind of blow it, we sometimes don't have that motivation to keep going. Another thing I came across when I was reading in this book is he talks about essentially self-pity. And oftentimes when we fall, when things aren't going well, we think that self-pity will make us feel better, and we start to justify what's happening because I'm unworthy and I'm not good enough. And he says what that actually does is, one, it doesn't help. And it actually makes us oversensitive. And, you know, I think back to Rachel, and she could have easily fallen into self-pity. This isn't going how I thought it was. This is too hard. Maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe I'll just, you know, sit here and not do it. But, you know, to overcome that and to just keep going and to keep reaching out and to keep moving forward is really what we have to do. And every time we fall, it gives us that renewed sense of purpose. And every time we can recognize something in ourselves that we need to work on, just like it said in the affirmation, let us face our faults with gratitude. Because once we're aware of them, we can, you know, really let go of them and offer them up in meditation. It's not like we have to spend that time with our heads down weeding these bad habits out. We need to offer them up to God. And in that light, we can be purified. I'd like to